Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Real Talk. My name is Stephen Meade. I'm the managing broker here at Domicile Real Estate. And this is where we talk about, well, honestly, whatever I feel like and whatever I think is important. We're going to nerd out a little bit today. So I've got the glasses on for that special occasion. And we're going to talk about the reason why many real estate headlines, probably most of them, when they talk about the market and a lot of economic data headlines are just flat out wrong. And even when they're not wrong, they're not exactly right either. And they're misleading, whether that's by intention to get clicks or sometimes I think just a lack of fundamental understanding by those who are creating the headlines about the data that they are reporting on. And obviously, different news outlets, some get it right a little bit more often than others. Usually, the business publications tend to get it a little bit more right and accurate. But when you're just looking about news in the market, there are a lot of ways that you can be led astray and be given information that, frankly, was not going to help you and is downright uninformative or misinformative. So, just as a reminder, we are a real estate brokerage. If you are looking to buy or sell real estate in Orange and LA counties here in Southern California, we would love to lend you our expertise. You can definitely reach out and we can help you with that. So let's go ahead and dive into it. The good news is, even when the headlines are wrong, usually if you are willing to read the entire article, there's some truth buried in there. But I'm going to tell you why these headlines are wrong and why you should be thinking differently about some of this real estate data that is commonly reported on. I really thought about this week, mainly because of the inflation data that came out this week. And I think a number of headlines that were published that were just wildly wrong. And I think would give anybody who is not an economist sort of the wrong idea about the numbers being reported. But I'm going to take a step just for a second and talk about something that we frequently do and why this data is often misreported. And the concept is called annualized data. And what annualized data means is that a lot of things we think of in life are meant to be expressed in annual numbers. So a great example of this is interest rates. If you go to buy a new car and they tell you that the interest rate on the loan is going to be 5%, your assumption is that that is an annual interest rate, right? That is your assumption that that is the amount of interest per year. And in fact, if you see APR, that stands for annual percentage rate, right? And we all just assume that things are annualized. A lot of things in our life we do based on sort of these annual cycles. But can you imagine if you went to go look at a car and they told you, you know what, we have a special promotion. The interest rate is only 1%. And what they didn't tell you was that that number was 1% per month. Well, that is over 12% per year if you compound monthly. So, that's obviously a very misleading way to quote interest rates. So we're very used to these annualized numbers. And in fact, payday loan companies have gotten in trouble for doing exactly what I described. They tell you, well, we'll loan you this money and it's only 5%. What they don't tell you is it's 5% per week, which obviously equates to a crazy annual interest rate, right? But when you're used to thinking about things in annual terms, 5% doesn't really sound like a lot, but it is. The other thing that we see in a lot of real estate and economic data is we do something called year over year. So, for example, when somebody says home prices are up 8%, if that is the headline, they almost always mean a year over year number. And the reason why year over year is so popular is, again, because we prefer that annualized data. It's something that we know about. We're familiar with percentage rates based on a year. The problem with that is that year over year data is basically an average of the last year, what's happened all 12 months of the year. And sometimes that's useful information, but in a rapidly changing market or a dynamic market, that is actually bad data. That does not tell you what is happening this second. It is skewed heavily towards telling you what happened over 6 months ago, which is not entirely useful information in a market that is moving quickly. So one of the reasons that we do this to some degree is something called data smoothing. When you have numbers that go up and down quite a bit, if you average them over, say, the last 3 months, or you average them over the last year, that helps get you a smoother looking graph that's easier to explain to people. Unfortunately, like I said, if you pick too long of a time period, like a year, to average over in a dynamic changing market like the one that we are presently in and have been in for the last 2 years, that's really wildly inaccurate data. So now I'd like to give you 2 examples so I can show you what is being said and kind of how to accurately interpret that. And so the first thing we're going to talk about here is we're going to talk about median home prices. And you know what, actually, let's talk about inflation. I would rather talk about inflation. So give me a second. Let me get the graph queued up here, and we could talk about inflation. So if you've been watching and following along this week, the big headline, and I hope Cassandra adds this here up above my shoulders, is 8.3%. Inflation is 8.3%. And very few headlines actually indicate that this is a year over year number. This is not inflation went up 8.3% last month. And in fact, you have to remember, news outlets are there to get your attention. That is their goal most of the time. If they are a profitable for-profit news enterprise, their goal is to have your attention, not necessarily to give you the best information. Now, the government, on the other hand, they do not care about your attention. And so the Bureau of Labor Statistics, who compiles and publishes inflation data, also did a press release earlier this week with inflation. And this was a graph that I think was on the second page of that press release. So I'm going to bring that up right now to show you guys that. Now, this is the chart that the Bureau of Labor Statistics released earlier this week, along with their press release, which did admittedly say 8.3% at the top of it. But if we look, this is the change month to month of CPIU, or the urban CPI, seasonally adjusted. And I want you to take a look at this. You fundamentally have an idea of what's going on. This is how much did inflation go up each month over the previous month. And if you look here, last year, 0.3, 0.4, 0.9, 0.7, 0.6, 0.6, 0.8, 1.2 in March, yikes, 0.3 in April, 1 in May, 1.3 in June. These are scary numbers. And then July, 0, and August, 0.1%. So not only are these numbers quite a bit lower than we have seen in the last 12 months, they are also quite a bit lower than we were a year ago. In fact, 1/3 of where we were a year ago. And while this doesn't tell the entire story, and I can tell there are people that are going to be itching at their keyboards, I think it's important to understand that I think it's very clear there was a trend here that inflation is in fact not continuing at the same rate that it was. But if you just read that 8.3% headline, you would feel like nothing has changed, and that would be wildly inaccurate. So now we're going to talk about the other example, which is median home prices, one of my favorite things to talk about. And I'm going to again show you how that data can be misleading in a lot of ways, and how it can be used to sort of get you to click and maybe give you a wrong impression about the market at hand. So the first thing we're going to slice this data is year over year price changes. Whenever you read a headline that says home prices are up X, they are almost always talking about year over year, and they rarely will say year over year. So if we look at this data, what do we have here? Year over year, this is starting from January of 2022. Wow, 15% year over year, 8%-ish, 15, 14, 13 and a half, 14. Now we're down to about 6. Now we're up to about 7. And then we're around 3.5 to 4% down here. So if you were just looking at this chart, your conclusion about the market right now would be that, the rate of growth is slowing. And you would be dead wrong about that. And the reason why you'd be dead wrong is, let's look at the next chart, which is sort of what I call the pessimist chart. In the pessimist chart, this is our month-to-month changes in home prices and the median home price. Now, you'll notice that there's kind of a lot of movement in this. We actually take this, when we built this graph, we did it based on a 2-week period in the middle of every month. That probably has a little bit more volatility. We wanted to kind of illustrate a point that this data would show you kind of having some big months of gains, some medium months here, and then most recently, in August, a negative 5% month over month change, right? So this makes things look really bad. Oh my God, home prices crashed last month. if you look at this chart. But finally, we're going to show data the way we show it. And this is the one that I think tells sort of the entire story of going on. And this is just a chart of what the median home price was each month. And I think this gives you a lot more context over what's happening. And of course, our goal is to provide information rather than to get people to click, as evidenced by our low view rates. But I would rather give 100 people good information about the market than have 1,000 people watch my videos with misinformation in them. So we're going to keep doing it the way I want to do it, because I think this is the way that really illustrates what's happening and gives you a sense of sort of the story of the market, right? All through 2021, we saw things kind of heading up, and then boy, did things accelerate to the moon in the spring, and then now they have eased off a bit. I think that's an accurate portrayal of where the market is. It also gives us a reference point that's a lot more useful. Well, where are prices? Well, they're about where they are towards the beginning of this year. We're looking at the August numbers right here. So that's all I have for you guys. Definitely read these articles all the way through. Most journalists are pretty good about accurately portraying if you're willing to dive into it. But the people that write those headlines, they are there to get you to click on the link and get you to spend your 10 seconds looking at whatever ad pops up first. They're not necessarily there to inform you as efficiently and quickly as possible. So if you like what you see, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Once again, we are a real estate brokerage. We operate here in Los Angeles and Orange counties in Southern California. If you would like actual expertise in your representation for buying or selling, we would love to help you out with that. There is a link down below to schedule a 15-minute, no cost, no obligation consultation if you'd just like to chat with us. And we've got some great videos coming up ahead for you. So definitely do think about subscribing if you like this. And we hope to see you again real soon.